Hey everyone, and welcome to the Legend Fiction Show. Today we're joined again by Catherine Witzaney, who was on just over a month ago, and she launched her first book, Wingless. And hold it up and wave it around so that we can all see that, Catherine. Look at that thing; it's beautiful. So it's almost a month since it's been out. Welcome back to the show. How has this last month been for you?
Oh, it's been busy. I always heard from fellow authors that, oh my goodness, book launch month is a whirlwind. It's crazy. And it definitely is, just trying to keep track of everything. And it's exciting, and trying to make sure you don't forget the different plans that you have. And yeah, I'm ready for a break. Ready for some decompression time now. But I'm really happy with how everything's gone so far. And yeah.
That is
It's been
awesome.
quite...
Okay. For those who don't know what Wingless is, go ahead and check the links in the description, or you can just search for the video on our YouTube channel and have a go through that. And what we wanted to talk about today was, after you finish your first draft, what happens next? I think there's a lot of authors in our community who are getting to that point where they're writing their last chapters, and I'm going to throw my hat in that ring too. And I'm kind of curious to know, what did you do as you finished the first draft of your book, and you've been working on it for a while? You opted to go which route did you go? It's not totally self-published. Was it hybrid or traditional?
So it's technically traditional, but I went with a small publisher. So that looks a little different sometimes than when you go with a really big publisher, but it is technically a fully traditionally published. I did self-publish the audiobook because I retained the audio rights for that. But that was less of a thing. It's present, it exists, but yeah.
Well, let's come back and touch on that, because I'm sure there are some authors who'd be interested to know, how did you do that? And where do I begin to even think about what that process is like? And that's me too. Okay, so let's start with that. You finished your first draft, you wrote the end, and then had another cup of coffee and a marshmallow or something. Nice.
Yes.
And then what did you do?
So I feel like the next step at this point depends on where you are at in your writing journey. If you have just started writing and you are you just been doing it for fun by yourself, the first thing you need to do is find some people to give you feedback on it. Now, you may already be at this point. If you are already part of a community like Legend Fiction, you may have already been sharing draft copies with people, getting critiques, getting feedback, and that's really good because that's what you want at this point. So my first tip would be, if you haven't already found beta readers and maybe one or two critique groups to join, do that. Find out what's out there, because until you start getting your writing in front of other people and getting their feedback on it, you won't know where you need to grow and improve and learn. And I feel like the most common misconception for people who have either never written a book or they're just super new to the writing world is that once you write your first draft, the most of the work is done. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. The first draft is going to go through a lot of revisions, a lot of changes and growth. And you can only really do that effectively with feedback from other people. So, yeah, that would be my first tip.
So be prepared for feedback. And if you're not getting feedback, go find a way to go get it. And yes, legend fiction is an option if you're writing, well, the kind of fiction that we all like. And you can have a look at our homepage to check that out, but find a group in a community, and there are a bunch out there. Okay, so that's feedback.
Quite a few. And also make sure that it's different getting feedback from, say, your friend group than it is getting feedback from fellow writers. So your best friend who has never written a book may be able to give you feedback on typos and grammar and what he likes and what he doesn't like in a broad sense, but that person is not going to be able to help you with how do you structure your story effectively? Like, why is the pacing not working in different places? How do you create a believable, meaningful character arc that actually moves your readers? How do you root out passive voice from your writing? Like, there's a lot of things that you kind of need help from fellow writers specifically on. It is still valuable to get input from non-writers, because that's who's mostly going to be reading your book, is non-writers. But in order to polish, it really helps to have people who are already kind of experienced in the writing craft realm, because they're going to give you a very different perspective than people who aren't. So,
yeah, good point. Okay, so we have finish your draft, and then 2, join writing groups to get feedback, and try to get it from fellow writers as well. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What's the next thing that you did?
The next step would be deciding, at this point, it kind of depends on, are you wanting to self-publish? Are you wanting to go the traditional route? Because the next thing I'm going to suggest is hiring an editor. Now, if you are, this should come after you've already done a bunch of work with critique groups and beta readers, and you've done all the stuff you can do by yourself. If you are self-publishing, I would say this is a need. This is not optional because really, even if you yourself are a professional editor, you are going to be blind to issues in your own story. It's the way your brain works. We all know that typos sneak in to published manuscripts all the time, even though they've got so many people trying to catch that. And it's because your brain just becomes blind to things that you've spent a lot of time on. You're too close to your own story to edit it effectively by yourself, in my opinion. And having that professional help will really mean that your story is polished and feel professional when it gets in the hands of readers, which is what you want. And so that's where I say, if you're doing it self-publishing, do that. Like, make sure this is a step in the process. Now, it kind of depends. There's a lot of freelance editors out there. Some are very, very expensive because they're extremely experienced. And while those people would probably do a very good job editing your book, it may not be in your budget. In fact, it probably shouldn't be in your budget to hire the most experienced, most expensive freelance editor out there, because you're probably not going to make that money back. It can be thousands of dollars if you're hiring somebody that is very, very experienced.
Can I ask what you did? What did you settle on?
So I tried to go for a kind of middle of the road. If you have like a tier of, this is the most expensive, most experienced, and this is the Joe down the street who's charging you hardly anything, I kind of aimed to be like right about here. And I chose to do this even though I was going the traditional route, and that was something I was going to touch on too, because I wanted to learn from it. You don't have to hire a freelance editor if you are traditionally publishing. But I thought I would learn a lot from the process. I had never worked with a professional before. I knew that I had some self-editing skills, but I wanted to improve on those. So I decided it was worth investing that resources in that way for my first book. And I'm happy I did that. The editor who I wound up hiring was good. Now that I've worked with other editors, I would say I think she could have done more, but she was still worthwhile working with. She was still competent, and I learned a lot from her. So you really need to make sure whoever you hire, you are reading reviews, you are checking to make sure from other authors, how does this person do? How are they to work with? Because editors can actually make your story worse if they're bad editors, or they can just not do much for you, and that's not what you want. That would be a waste.
It's a matter of finding an editor who matches what you want to do. Like, you don't want to, if you're writing, high fantasy fiction, you don't really want somebody who's a biographer in mid-century Western romance, and it's
hugely
for different things.
Yes. So make sure your editor has experience in the genre and age category that you are writing in, because it's very different. Like, I mean, even for me, like, middle grade looks very different than YA. And so if you go to a YA editor, who is what I went to, because I thought I was writing YA at the time, they're going to give you different suggestions than someone who is experienced working in middle grade, because different ages require different things. So it helps to know that in advance.
Yeah, very cool. Okay. So hire or investigate an editor. And so you then put yourself through that, and then what?
So after you've done that, if this is where I feel that the indie and traditional paths kind of diverge, because if you are self-publishing, this is the point when, okay, you start self-publishing, you start figuring out how to format your book and how you're going to distribute it and all of those things. I have not done that myself, so most of what I have to say will be on the opposite side of things, where it's the traditional realm, because the next step would be the querying and submissions process. Now, I want to sort of clarify at the start that querying and submissions are two slightly different things. Querying is generally meant for agents. And submissions is for publishers. Bigger publishers, well, I'd say medium to large publishers will not let you submit directly to them. You need to get an agent first, and then that agent will take your manuscript on submission to the publishers and try and present it to them. So it's kind of like you do the same thing twice if you're going with the bigger route. Some smaller publishers will let you actually directly pitch your book to them without an agent, and that's the route I wound up going. So at this point, what you would need to do is actually study how to query, how to create a book proposal, because it is extremely, you don't just write up a casual email to the agent and like, hey, and just kind of present it however you think you should and send it off, because query letters are actually highly formalized down to the point where you could study, like, this is what you do in the first sentence. This is what you do in the second sentence. Like, they're very short, succinct, and meant to serve a very specific function. And because agents get so many submissions, they get swamped with people, they will actually use this as a way of weeding people out. So if you have not taken the time to study up on the conventions of query letters and book proposals, they will just take that as an automatic no for you. They'll just say, nope, this person didn't take the time, and they'll just reject you. So it's worth your while. There are resources online. There's even courses you can take. I wound up paying like $10 to take a course about how to do a good book proposal from an agent and editor that had put that together. And it was really worthwhile. They even gave me a like format and a template for creating my own. And a query letter is a lot shorter than a book proposal. The book proposal is going to include things like a marketing plan and your past sales history. And
doesn't a book proposal come before a book is even written?
It can. If you are an author who is already established with a publisher, yeah, you can pitch ideas to your publisher and get signed for that idea that you then have to go write. But usually if you are a first-time author, that is not the way it works because the publisher doesn't know whether you can produce what you say you're going to produce yet. They want to see a track record first. So for first-time authors that have never been published, that's not going to happen. You're going to show up with your finished, polished manuscript in hand, and you're going to be trying to convince them that it's worth their while. So that's basically the next step. This step can be the most demoralizing part of the process. I found it to be, because you're going to get a lot of rejections. My biggest piece of advice would be, I guess it's multiple small pieces, but send out your queries in batches, and don't query your favorite agents and publishers first. Because as you do this, and as you get rejections, and you might even get a little bit of feedback, most of the time you're going to either get no response at all, or you're going to get a form rejection, which is just blanket. They send it to everyone. But sometimes they will take the time to give you specific feedback, either on your writing or your presentation, and take those and learn from them. And that's why you do it in batches, because you will polish this query letter as you do it. It will continue to evolve, and you'll get much better at it. I went and queried my dream agent and my dream publisher. They were the first two that I sent off at the start. And then a month later, I was like, why did I do that? Because I learned as I went, oh, this wasn't how I wanted to present my story. Even when you study how these things work, it takes time for you to realize, well, what is my book really about? I know I wrote it, but it's very hard to sum up a 90,000 word book in a paragraph. And, well, what is the heart of this? What am I trying to communicate with this? How do I want to present it? That you can only learn through trial and error as you try presenting it. So make maybe a A list, a B list, and a C list of the ones that you like. The A list is your dream people. The B list is like, well, you'd still be happy to work with them. And the C list is kind of like, well, they're not your first pick, but you'd be willing to if you had to. And be careful about querying people that you definitely wouldn't want to work with. I feel like that it sounds like something that should be obvious, but if you are at the point where you have gotten dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of rejections and you're running out of your preferred people and you're feeling desperate, you may just start wanting to query every person with two legs and a heartbeat because you're getting desperate. But that's, getting a publisher or agent who is not suited to you, whether it's your values or they're just not very professional, can be worse than not getting published.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. Would be an important piece of advice. Pace yourself. I sent out 70 submissions within the first month. I was very keen. And then I don't recommend this, because then you have to spend the next 5-6 months with the rejections slowly trickling in. And those are fine. The first 30 or 40, you're like, okay, I can deal with this. When you're getting to like the 70th or the 80th or the 100th, you're like, I'm really done. So it can take its toll.
How did you send out 70 in 1 month? I mean, is that literally visiting more than 70 publisher websites and finding their entry requirements and then just trying to tailor an email or a Word document for each one of them and then sending that off?
Basically, I was mostly querying agents, to be fair. There are more agents out there than there are small publishers who I was interested in publishing with. One of the things I was looking for in small publishers is I wanted them to do a traditional print run. That's sort of a separate issue, but if they don't do a traditional print run, in my opinion, you may as well just self-publish. But that's neither here nor there. There are big, long lists. So if you go onto Query Tracker or Manuscript Wishlist, or you just start, look up the hashtag MSWL, Manuscript Wishlist on Twitter, and you will get huge, long lists of different agents that are looking for specific things. And so then it's easy to get access, and it is a lot of work. I was a little obsessive in that month because I had nothing else to work on the writing side of things. I was so excited to have hit that point. I've been planning for it for years, and it can be fun because you're just like, wow, what if I get with these people? And you're just, it's fun putting yourself out there until it's not. So it is a draining part of the process, and I would say just be aware of that going into it. It didn't make me want to give up, but it wasn't fun.
So how did you land on your current publisher?
So for me, what wound up happening was getting advice from one of the small publishers that I did pitch to, who said, you should maybe consider switching to middle grade, because I was pitching as YA, which is young adult, so that's for teenagers. Middle grade would be for like 9 to 12-year-olds. And she felt that my idea was good, but that it would fit better in that realm. And she was right. That was why I was getting so many rejections. I was just pitching to the wrong crowd, basically. And so when I did, she gave me a referral to the publisher I'm with now. She said, they would probably be interested in this book. So then I went to their website. I reached out to them and explained that I had been referred to them by this other editor, and this was my situation. Would they be interested? And they said, yeah, submit it to us. And then I wound up working with them, and they liked it. So that's how I got in with an actual publisher. But it's, yeah, I was going to say, there's what do you do? I was going to include a bit of advice for people about what do you do when you've been querying for a year and you're not getting anywhere. Because that is the state that a lot of aspiring authors are in. They've been in the querying trenches, or maybe you even got an agent, but your agent has been on submission for the past year and no publisher wants it. That can happen too. Getting an agent is not a guarantee that you're going to get published. What do you do at that point? And I feel like you kind of have two different paths you can take. One of them is to say, okay, well, I tried the traditional route. I'm just going to self-publish. Which is viable if that's reasonable, as long as you're willing to put the work in that self-publishing requires and you have the resources for it. The other option that should be kept in mind is sometimes the issue is not with the story. Sometimes the issue is with the timing and the market. And it may just be that the ideal agent or publisher for your book can't take it right now because they're already publishing something similar, and timing-wise is just bad timing. So you could just take your idea, set it aside for now. It's in a state where it's ready to publish, but it can't get there right now, and work on something new and try to get that new idea published. And then when that does happen, because sometimes you'll do that, you'll change tangents, you'll just do a totally new project, and then suddenly that will get published. And then sometimes what happens is your publisher comes to you and goes, do you have anything else? Or your agent, or sometimes when you are pitching that new project. I actually had this happen when I was pitching Wingless. I had an agent come back to me and say, this idea is not what I'm looking for right now, but I love your writing style. Do you have anything else that you could pitch to me right now? Nice. I didn't. So I had to say, no, I don't. But that can happen. And if you do have these other projects that are just waiting in the wings, you can say, actually, yeah, I've got this and I've got this, and you can put it forward, and that might be the perfect time for that book. And you might wind up.
I just have to ask, if you had said yes in that moment, what would she have wanted to see from you? Could you just have said, well, I've got this one idea I've been working on that does this and this and this, but it's not written yet? Or would she have been like, I want to see the first 10 chapters, or I want to see the synopsis for this thing? Or
it would have to be, she would want something that is basically already ready. If you haven't written it yet, that's not much use to them, because they're looking for something they can take and now go on submission to publishers too, because that's their job, is to get this book published. They don't get paid until your book is published. So they're not really looking for, well, I have an idea, but it isn't written yet. That doesn't really cut it.
Yeah.
So
okay. Anything further on that front about querying and then being in the trenches for ages, and then, like you said, making a decision to either go with somebody more specific or self-publishing? Was there anything else that you wanted to share on that front? Because how long were you doing that for? It was like easily over 7 months, you said?
Yeah, I think it was roughly 7 or 8 months, because I started in May of 2022, and then I signed my contract in October. Was it May? No, March. I started in March and I signed my contract in October. So it was a chunk of time. That's faster than some people. Some people have to query for a year or more before they get anywhere. And that's where I would encourage people who are in the querying trenches, also work on something else during that time. I sort of was. I had another idea I was kind of playing around with, but I wasn't maybe pursuing it as much as I could have been. So I would recommend that to people, because that way you're not so focused on the querying side of things that you're just like, it gives you something to distract you, and you're honing your skills, and you're creating something that you will hopefully still be able to publish in the future, even if this project you can't publish right away. So it's worth doing.
Were you talking about the book in any way, or doing things like audience building or any sort of marketing for the book while you were going through the querying process?
That is a great question, because platform building is important. And in fact, one of the reasons why you might struggle to get published is lacking a platform, because publishers do like to see some kind of platform. Mm-hmm. I decided I didn't want to start sharing about my book specifically until I basically had a contract in hand, like an explicit way. That was just my personal choice. But I did start trying to build. I was working on building a newsletter subscriber list and an Instagram following. Yeah. During that time, I started that back when I was finishing up self-edits for the book before I started querying, because I knew it was important. And there are lots of things you can do, like on Instagram, for example. Like I shared about my writing journey, even though I wasn't sharing specific things about the book. I made funny reels about writing because it was fun. I tried sharing quotes or just different things like that. You don't really know what you like doing until you start throwing things at the wall and see what sticks. So have fun with it. I would definitely say do that. It's important. Some authors will also start trying to promote their book at that point too. I've seen that. That can work. You might have to be careful how much you're sharing of it, because I haven't encountered this myself, but some publishers won't want you to have put a whole bunch of your book out there publicly if you're going to publish it with them, right? So you want to be careful about that. You can share excerpts. That should be fine. You can even share excerpts of a published contracted book. I mean, you're allowed to do that. But you want to be careful what you're putting out there, because things may have to change.
Yep. No, that's true. Okay, so in wrapping up, some of the key advice then, in you looking back over the last year of your journey, key advice was send out queries in batches. We'll find an editor and a community. Send out queries in batches. and then be working on another project?
Mm-hmm. Those would be the main things, because that will just sort of keep you. Ideally, you don't want to be just a one hit wonder. I mean, if you are wanting to be an author as your career, you're going to want to have multiple different projects and multiple different books. In fact, some authors publish dozens and dozens of books. And so if you can get to the point where you aren't so attached to your one project that it's your baby and it's your child and it's you're just so attached to it and you don't want to make changes to it, it's actually good to be able to develop a certain amount of detachment from your project so that you can be more objective and have multiple different things. This isn't your only chance at publishing. You can write other stories too, and they will matter. So,
what kind of author are you yourself looking to be? Somebody who puts out content or books pretty frequently, or once every so many years? Like, what are you looking at for yourself?
I would like to publish a book every year or so. Would be kind of, I know I do have book 2 for Wingless is contracted for next summer. So that's definitely coming next year.
How does that make you feel?
I'm pretty happy about that. It's a little bit of pressure because it's like, oh, wow, I'm having a baby this year too. So I've got a lot on my plate.
That's 2.
But it's exciting. I do have ideas. At this point, I have ideas for like three other books I'd like to, some of them set in this world. I've got one other idea I'm working on right now that is separate from this. It's a YA idea. It's very early brainstorming stages, but I do want to pursue that. So I'd like to, one book every year or every other year seems reasonable to me. Some people can produce way more. Some people, it's less. I think it's whatever works for your lifestyle.
Very cool. Well, any final thoughts that you want to leave with people, especially those in our community?
Yeah, I know at the beginning we did briefly touch on audiobook self-publishing.
That's true, yes. How did you get into that?
That, I knew I wanted an audiobook because I love audiobooks, but it's very, very expensive to have an audiobook professionally produced by a voice actor, like by the tune of thousands and thousands of dollars, depending on how long your book is. Most books do not make back what they are, what they cost. So I knew I didn't want to hire a voice actor for that, and I was interested in trying it myself. So I did the time and the research to record my own audiobook. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work. This is something I was personally passionate about, so it worked for me, and I had so much fun with it that I'm going to continue to do that for my other books. Nice. But if you are not super duper excited by the idea of recording your own book and then trying to learn how to master it and like get it edited and polished and all of that, might not be the best choice for you because it's going to take a lot of time. And that time, I've heard from multiple authors who have done it and not enjoyed it, that they wish they hadn't because it took away from time they could have been writing other things. Okay. So that's something to keep in mind. I really enjoyed it. It was worth it to me. I was able to do it fairly cheaply. I used Hindenburg Narrator as the software for recording and for editing because it's created for creating audiobooks. It's got everything in it that you need. It's subscription based. So between the 1 month free trial and then I think I paid for 1 month of it, which was like $20. So yeah, I used this microphone and I did it up in our living room because there's a lot of soft surfaces to absorb echoes and things. It was, yeah. And then when it comes to actually self-publishing, there's a lot of options out there that you can look into. There's Audible, there's Findaway Voices. There's a lot of controversy over Findaway Voices right now. And so do your research, decide what you want to go with on that front. I'm still kind of learning. I just kind of put it out there and it's there. I've sold some copies of it. I decided to use both Audible and Findaway Voices separately because of the amounts of royalties. Obviously, I went non-exclusive with Audible so that I could distribute in other ways. If I want to, I could sell it through my website. Haven't figured out if I want to go to all of that work yet, but it's an option.
Okay. Well, cool. Gosh, man, we covered a lot. I'd love to keep one of the questions that we didn't cover today, but maybe we can have you come back, and I'd like to kind of hear like what have you been up to since the book was published and how you've been doing the marketing and so on. So apart from the Audible or the audiobook, it'd be fun to have you come back and chat more about what are the other things you're doing to get the word out there and to grow your list. And now that you do have the book, how are you using that with social media, that sort of thing? And I'm sure there are a lot of members of our community who'd be very interested in this sort of thing too, because we're encouraging them to, well, not just encouraging, some of them are already doing it. They're self-publishing, or they're just having fun, and they're also sharing stuff on social. So valuable things to learn from somebody who's already out there, like yourself, doing it. So where can people go online to get a copy of your book, learn more about you, and get in touch with you?
The best place would be my website. So that's just CatherineWitzaney.com, and you'll find everything you need there, including links to all the different places you can buy the book. And yeah, absolutely. I would be delighted to come back on and talk about book launching specifically, because that's a whole other kettle of fish and it's important.
Okay, well, let's make a plan. I think that's a great idea. So check the links in the descriptions, friends. It's going to be probably the first one right there, CatherineWitzaney.com. You can check out a copy of Wingless and get into it, and maybe come back and we'll continue following her journey and seeing how she gets along with publishing her book. All right. Till next time, everybody, keep writing. May the Lord be with you. And most importantly, keep writing.